Hi, everyone. Welcome. 3 o'clock, we'll go ahead and get started just with some introductions. Some housekeeping hints might be coming on board as we go ahead and get things started. I know that folks are coming in. I'm watching the chat kind of fill in. We have today with us some students, we have educators, we have parents. We're continuing actually today a conversation that we started a few weeks back regarding the class of 2020 in these uncertain times of COVID-19. But whether or not you were with us last time, it shouldn't make much of a difference as we are covering some new topics as well as just diving deeper into some things that we have probably all been thinking about but might not have had an opportunity to explore in a platform together collectively with each other. Let's see, some housekeeping. You will only hear the panelists who you see on the screen chatting. We do encourage you to use the Q&A functionality, which is open now. Adam Smith, my co-host and moderator, will be pulling questions from the Q&A throughout the session today. You can use that at any point in time. I'll be using it as well. We'll be recording, so if there's anything you miss or if you wish to share with your colleagues, we'll be sure to send that link out to you afterwards. Let's see, this is probably the best part, the most exciting part, getting to share with you my esteemed colleagues. And so in order to do so, I will pass it off to Adam.
Allie, thank you so much. Great to be here again, y'all. We're going to give people a little bit of time to jump on board. Please throw in the chat, if you don't mind, all of our participants, where you're from. It's great to know who's here and who's present and who's on. You know, we tend to be nationwide, so it's great to hear. Throw in your city and state where you are. That would be great if people can do that as you're jumping on. My name is Adam Smith. I'm the Director of Community Partnerships and Educational Access for Doorway to College Foundation. We are a national nonprofit dedicated to college access, not just access, but success through things that are innovative. So partnerships with programs like TRIO that have like-minded missions that focus on helping all students not only get to college, but through college. So you'll be getting some additional communication from us going forward. It's great to see everybody putting their information in the chat. I'm going to give it to our panelists and give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell us where they currently work. Institution or K-12 environment. So Tyrone, can you kick us off, please?
Sure, I'm Tyrone Wilson. I'm an academic advisor from the University of Kentucky, go Wildcats. And I've been doing this kind of work for longer than I want to say, over 30 years.
Thank you, Tyrone. Megan?
I'm Megan Barley-Fogarty, Director of Youth and Family Engagement at Centro Hispano de East Tennessee in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Thank you, Megan. Ms. Schrader, please.
Hello, everyone. Katie Schrader, Central Ohio native. So if there are any Buckeyes out there, OH. Right now I work in Northeast Ohio. Oh, Adam, that face. I work in Northeast Ohio at Oberlin College. It's a small private liberal arts institution. I am Assistant Director with the Career Development Center.
Outstanding. Sam?
Hello, my name is Sam Geyer. I work with Linn-Mar Community School District and teach science and also tech classes, but do a lot of working with students on the side.
Thank you, Sam. Where is Linn-Mar? Remind everybody where Linn-Mar is.
That is in Marion, Iowa.
Lovely Marion, Iowa. Miss Aaron, please.
Hello, I'm the College Career Coordinator at Dowling Catholic High School in West Des Moines, Iowa.
Outstanding. Thank you, Aaron. Teresa?
Hi, I'm Teresa Radomski-Bamba. I'm the Assistant Director in the Honors Program at Miami University. That's the one in Ohio, not the one in Florida. It is not that one here.
Okay, great. We also, I hope I didn't miss anybody. We also have some outstanding students on our panel. So I'm going to give Aaliyah Riddle an opportunity to introduce herself, talk about her high school, and Aaliyah, talk about a little bit of the work that you and some of the student leaders here in Knox County did recently and some of the results of that work.
Hi, like Adam said, my name is Aaliyah Riddle. I am currently, well, I guess I could classify myself now as a college freshman, but I just graduated from Austin East High School in Knoxville, Tennessee. I will be attending Fisk University in the fall to major in psychology, looking to double major, possibly in biochemistry. As Mr. Smith said, I have recently done some good work in our community. So last week, we were informed of our graduation requirements. Well, not really requirements, but how they were going to do our ceremony. And they told us that no family, no outside guests were going to come. We could not have communal celebration. We had to come on our football field, walk, get your diploma, go straight to your car. And that just did not sit well with me. So I made a Facebook post and I got students from every high school in Knox County. I only missed 3. I got them to send a video on why they thought that their family should be at their graduation. We had some people who were first generation high school graduates. We had some people whose parents were immigrants. We had some people who were independents, meaning that they don't live with their parents, they represent themselves. And so we put that onto a video. Me and another female student from Austin East coordinated that together. I sent it to the superintendent, I sent it to the school board representatives, I sent it to my teachers, I sent it to Mr. Adams, I sent it to everybody. And now I'm proud to say that yesterday we were notified that we will now be allowed to have parents at our graduation. So I think.
Well, and the cool part for everyone about Aaliyah and the student leaders' work here in Knox County was that they just didn't say, we think we should have a graduation. They had a Google Doc that had best practices and what were happening in other school districts, not only in the state of Tennessee, but nationwide. They were offering options for the district to say, hey, these are things that are also happening. We understand that it won't be a normal commencement, but these are some other things as opposed to doing nothing. And I thought that was the really cool part of it, is that you weren't just pointing out a problem, but that's what leaders do, is identify some solutions that other people were doing. We've had some other folks join us. Sabrina, do you want to introduce yourself and let us know where you currently work?
Hi, I'm Sabrina Donegan. I'm the Assistant Director for the TRIO Upper Bound Program, and I am at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign.
Thank you, Sabrina. Good to have you. So I'm going to give it to Ms. Eve Goldstein. So Eve is here. Eve, can you tell us where you are, where you're going to go to college? And can you tell us, because I know you're a student athlete and a very well-rounded student, can you talk a little bit about how that's affected, being a student athlete has affected kind of your progression? Because you didn't have a spring season, right? And now we have to transition to college with a lot of uncertainty.
Right. Like Mr. Smith said, I'm a senior at Somerset High School in Wisconsin. So it's near the Twin Cities, right on the border by Stillwater. You might know that. And yeah, I'm a student athlete. So my spring season was canceled. Right for a while, it was really indefinite. So we did have hope for a really long time. So I was really just hanging on to that last string of hope that they would give us a season, or at least just some competitive season left in the last month or 2 that we had of school. And unfortunately, they decided that it was best. And of course, I understand that it was best that we cut the season short. And so I did get a couple of weeks of practice, and with my dad as my coach, who is also really good friends with Mr. Smith. They go way back. He's been my coach. We've been training at my house We've done the best we can. We lift out of my garage. We train in my backyard. We drive all over the place to go practice. I'm in track and field, so I throw the shot put in the discus, and I will continue to throw in school, where I go to University of North Dakota in Grand Forks on a scholarship, which I'm very thankful for as well. So I think that just not having the senior season, I just didn't get to prove to myself how much better I could be. So I'm just gonna have to work even that much harder in college to see like where I can go with this sport and just like start a whole new journey, a whole new life. And I'm super excited about that.
Good, thank you, Eve. We really appreciate you being here. We also have a college student, Ms. Farah. So Farah, can you talk a little bit about who you are, where you go to school, and talk a little bit about some of the communication, if you've heard any, that's gone out to incoming freshmen from the university, and what are some of your thoughts and recommendations on what freshmen and their parents and people who love them should be taking into account before they come to campus this fall?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Farah Sanders. I am a senior at the University of Alabama, majoring in news media with a focus in sports communication. And I'm entering my 9th semester. So I've been in the college environment for a while. As far as Alabama, this university has been kind of turned on its head trying to figure out what to do in light of COVID-19. But I think we as a collective, the student body and administration, are kind of meshing or working together in a way that we really haven't seen in a while or seen before, to my knowledge. So we've been trying to get freshmen and incoming freshmen aware of the fact that we're not trying to necessarily push forth this message of a certain future. My university just recently announced a couple of weeks ago that they did plan on having a reopening in the fall. Our first term of our summer semester, for any freshmen that are in early college or are trying to get their courses before the fall semester, they're aware that your first term will be digital and the second term is, right now, it's set to be in person, but we'll know for certain later. And we've also gone completely virtual with our Bama Bound, which is our freshman orientation. So new software has been developed. OIT, Strategic Communications have been working together really hard to just create the entire spirit and include the information that comes with Bama Bound, but while keeping incoming freshmen safe.
Good, thank you, Farah. That's some great perspective. Just a reminder, please put any questions that you have in the Q&A. So we have a good question from Mr. Brown. So the pandemic brings to light future-focused thinking. Do you believe that the institution have failed students in preparing for thinking about the future in this way? Teresa, can you take that one?
I think institutions are trying to balance a lot of competing needs, and high on that list is how to educate students, continue to educate students. They don't want to stop doing that, but a lot of schools, including the institution that I'm at, their focus has been on residential education. And I know there's some other panelists who are at similar colleges. So it's really hard for those schools to do what they do best when people can't gather. So I think they're struggling right now I think a lot of institutions are struggling to figure out how they're going to balance what they do well and the experience that students are looking forward to and have chosen chosen to attend that institution for, with this the public health needs and the changing situation. I mean, even in the last week, there's been new information emerging about how this virus is affecting kids who we thought before were largely unaffected, other than catching it, maybe transmitting it, but not actually getting sick. Now there's new information coming to light about that. And I don't know the extent to which that will affect, I mean, college students, I don't know enough about, what's going on to know how that would affect college age people, traditional college age people. But I think that institutions are trying to figure out how to navigate that. And they're coming from a particular perspective of this is how we do things. And they're trying to figure out how do we adjust what we do and still do it well and do it all very quickly and with the resources that we have, knowing that those resources aren't going to expand anytime soon. So I think that it's challenging for institutions to make these decisions, and I would guess that as they learn more, there will be change. I'm expecting to see changes in how institutions respond to this over the next couple months, because I bet there are going to be a lot of changes depending on how the nature of this pandemic shifts over, through the end of July. If a lot of things change, I think we could see some institutions changing their fall plans at a relatively late date.
Yeah, I think that's one of the keys, right? If you're at Miami or Alabama or Tennessee or the University of Illinois, those institutions have continued, North Dakota, to sell the on-campus experience. That's the special sauce, right? That's what makes them different from a place-bound, small, directional university in the state, right? Is that you have that experience, and it's almost like that business model is now being tested, right? And folks are struggling with, well, we want that business model. We want to pledge the sorority and we want to come on campus and have those same experiences, but the reality is they're not. I think the one thing that I'll just say that continues that I would say as a parent of two college educated kids, that this is really tough for parents to tell their kids, you're not going to be able to do this like you planned, right? Eve's dealing with that. Aaliyah's dealing with that. It's not the same. Now, this isn't 40 years ago when people were going off to war at 18 in Vietnam, or the struggles that people had in World War II, but it's important that parents understand that the difference between a college and their local high school is that a college is, fundamentally, it is a business. And folks are going to do everything they can to keep their business open, just like Belk or JCPenney's. And I think that's an important thing to understand is you can't expect the university to think about the health and well-being of your child as their primary objective. That really just can't be, right? That's not the business model that these institutions have. So one of the things I wanted to ask Tyrone is, as online courses are continuing to be focused on, there's been a challenge in the spring dealing with students with learning challenges, right? Students with IEPs, students who needed accommodations. How do you envision, or how is Kentucky dealing with students who have accommodations from 504 plans, from IEPs, and how do you think that affected that not having those accommodations in place or having alternate accommodations will affect them?
So we at the University of Kentucky, like everybody else, we're still trying to figure a lot of things out. The most important thing is that we have to have, and we're trying now to put aside some special academic success coaches, if you will, to help students who are using disability services on campus. So those individuals will be, kind of set to the side, and they'll be designated just for those individuals to be able to access. Because as you know, we have to be really flexible in trying to help our students with unique learning needs. And so we're trying to figure out a way to do that. And one of the things we have committed to is just having some people in the wings that only those individuals can access. So it won't be any problem with trying to get through to them and trying to get, answers back to them concerning their academics. As you said, Adam, the biggest thing that, the institutions are struggling with now, and I tell this to my students even to this day and prior, is understanding your relationship with the institution. This is big business. And what you have to figure out, parents and students, is how you're going to interact with your college or your university. Do you think that they are treating you as if you were in K through 12, like it's a public service? No, you're a student, but you're also a customer. This is how these big schools kind of operate. So as you said, Adam, I'm glad you raised that issue and made that statement about you've got to look after your own health and your own safety, no matter where you go.
Thank you, Ty. Aaron, we were kind of talking offline before people came on. Your work in the high school centers around a lot of college prep and a lot of college coaching, right? And helping your students. Talk a little bit about, have you seen any differences? Obviously there's differences because you're not face-to-face, but differences in student and parent expectations about fall in light of COVID-19. And if so, or if not, can you talk a little bit about what you would hope parents and students would take into account in light of this, if there haven't been any changes in perspective or aspiration or idea as far as what they're going to do next?
Sure. We, at my high school, I have 339 seniors, and I'm the essential college counselor, and I work with 4 school counselors in my role. And I have a student where his mom called me really upset that he is dead set on going halfway across the country for his college choice. And he has been dead set. That was his plan really since January. And they were just trying to figure out logistics of doing a college visit with traveling, even just before COVID-19. And then since then, he is going to that institution, and his mom is very concerned about him going halfway across the country due to health concerns, because this student, he's been very stubborn, he's very independent, but she was telling a story that, he may not always take care of himself with his health, and he doesn't always rest or sleep. And she's concerned that he's not going to take care of himself if something were to happen when they're in-person classes in the fall, because unfortunately, a lot of us know, like our high schools, our schools, our residence halls, living communities, they breed infection and sickness, and everyone doesn't necessarily take their space. So it's tough to know. And then I have other families that they're concerned about, they're maintaining their plan of where they're going to go to school, but they do realize it's going to be an expensive opportunity online versus if it was in the residence halls and in person, like so many smaller private schools tend to offer that experience. And so, it's been a little hard to have those conversations, because I certainly can't tell a student parent, make sure you keep your kid home and don't let them go to, go far away, when it's what they want. And in turn, this student in particular, his dad went halfway across the world to go to school. So he'll throw it back on his parents and say, hey, dad got to do this, why can't I? And so obviously it's a different time. But I think that's a challenging conversation that a lot of students are having, and a lot of parents are waiting to see what happens. There's some schools that aren't going to make announcements until mid-July, and some feel that's too late to know if they're going to be in person or not. There's some schools that have already decided that they're going online, and then I think that's going to trickle down with where students decide to actually enroll in August or September.
Yeah, so recently, I think it was yesterday or the day before, the University of California system and the state university system all said we're not doing face-to-face in the fall. But because it's a business, right, those businesses decided we aren't going to do it, so the customers can go to Arizona where they're going to be open. right? And so that's a huge pressure that the institutions are facing, many of whom lost tens or hundreds of millions of dollars just in the spring term. And then you have the monster that is athletics, right? Where you could have teams in a conference in the state of California not fielding a football team or a soccer team this fall, but yet Arizona is, and they're in the same conference. So I think the one thing takeaway that continues that I would love to share after decades in the higher ed business with my colleagues around the country is make sure we're telling students, as Ty said, interacting with these institutions like they're a business, not like they're a public service like a high school or a middle school or elementary school. It's just not the same thing. And you have the ability to make some different decisions with that. One of the questions for our students, so Eve, why don't you take this one that somebody was asking. If UND does not go face-to-face in the fall, what is your plan B? You have a whole athletic part to consider too, but just as a student, what's your plan B if fall doesn't happen?
So as of right now, UND has announced that they have made, they're planning for face-to-face classes, but you never know when that could change. And I honestly haven't even thought about it. If they do online, if they don't do it at all, I haven't really laid out my options, and that's probably not healthy on my part, but also thinking about what track will be like. Sorry, my dogs are barking in the background if you hear that, but that's annoying, sorry. But like, will my coach be in contact with me through email, sending me workouts, training? Do I have to send videos? Like all that kind of stuff. But also I worry about my education because I don't want to forget everything that I've learned in my past 4 years of experience with school. I don't want all that to go to waste. And I'm not an online learner. So if things do end up going south, I don't know what I'm going to do. I did not struggle really that much though with the high school portion of the online because it's fairly easy and simple and easy to comprehend, and the teachers were just marvelous with communication and understanding that not every student is going to be successful at first. And then I got into my routine and things were going pretty well, and I'm just glad it's over now, and I don't really ever want to do it again. So I'm glad it's face-to-face this fall, but again, you never know when it could turn around. But the university has made it clear that they've extended times in between classes so that they can clean. They're currently in the works of allowing one student per room, which again, I don't know how they're going to figure that out, but they're really trying to encourage students to be one per room. So they're doing the best that they can, and they're communicating really well with prospective students going to UND. I don't know what other colleges are doing, but as far as UND is face-to-face, and I'm just really looking forward to going to school there next year if that happens. If it doesn't, I don't know. I'll have to really figure out a plan. But as of right now, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and just see where it goes, because there's no big thing like what tomorrow shows. But this is a wake-up call, I guess, for myself to find a plan B.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great question.
That's good. So Sabrina, do you?
That's my ability.
No, that's great. Sabrina, can you take yourself off mute? And obviously working with TRIO, working with Upward Bound, every day you're talking to students about their plans and their next steps. What would you recommend to a high school senior for a plan B right now? What should their plan B be? What are some of the options?
Yeah, so I would say definitely students have to look at their financial situation first. And so when you're thinking about financially, what does that look like for you and for your family, then that's how you start to build your plan. And then just weighing the options in terms of where you've been accepted, but also what your schools are doing. So some of the schools are giving options for freshmen. So they may be saying, oh, you take an online class or you do this. What I have been advising my seniors, especially for those who are considering out-of-state schools, is to take summer classes first at that institution online and to see, how that experience is. If they have a good experience, then that may be something that they can consider in the fall. If they don't have a great experience, then we need to come back to the drawing board and see what that would look like, them going somewhere closer to home. And so I think that's what they need to do right now. We as educators and parents, we need to just be honest with the students and let them know, hey, like, the way that college was before COVID is going to look completely different, regardless of what the institution decides to do, whether they decide to host online classes or face-to-face classes. It's going to look completely different than it's ever looked before, and just preparing them mentally, emotionally for what that's going to look like, and just being honest with them about what you can afford financially, what you're comfortable with, and what you're not comfortable with.
That's great. Farah, some of the conversation I've heard, especially living in the Southeast, is, we're going to get students back and we're going to have students observe social distancing. And some schools have said we're going to give students thermometers so they can check their temperature. And we're going to do all of these things. Is that as a student, is that super realistic to think that students are going to look out for their health and safety? And where does the line, do you think, as a student, go away from the student and go on the university, and even on the family and the people that care about the students?
So there are certain practices that I don't find realistic. The passing out of personal thermometers was not an idea that I'm aware of that has been circulated through the UA system. I think possibly UAB, but not UA in Tuscaloosa. It's something that I don't see a lot of students necessarily doing. Not to make light of it, but we have issues, filling out our SOIs at the end of the semester. And, those are entirely the university needs those to see how their instructors are performing. So I think that as far as liability, as far as like, when does this fall on the university? I think that it falls on the university as soon as we put forth the message of safety in the students. So like you were saying, college is a big business and we do need to speak to them like they are a business, because that's essentially what it is. However, within their business model, especially with Alabama, is #Bamily, and we are really big on this hashtag Still Tied Together, and they'll start out every message with, the University of Alabama is working so hard to make sure that your students remain safe. So I think that as a communications person, my business mind is working right now. As soon as you put forth that message, you are putting liability on yourself. And so now you've put yourself in an environment where you are now assuming a lot of the responsibility. Whereas if you had not have put out that message, then maybe, plausible deniability. But there is this message of family and culture and environment. And I think that that's super important to understand that, okay, you said it, so now what? And I know that as far as my university, we're considering separate housing for immunocompromised students, but it's not necessarily set in stone. We're just kind of seeing.
That's good. That's good. That's my student, Farah. That's pretty good. That's right. Okay. So right now there's a lot of people working remote. Sam, can you talk about, obviously in the K-12 space, you've been working remote for months. How much of your work could you continue to do remote in August? And would you feel comfortable going to your administrator and saying, you know what, because I have this situation, because there's so much focus of this on the students, right? And rightfully so. We should be focusing on students. But pretty much everybody on this webinar today works with students, right? And we have families and we have our own health and all of these things. would you feel comfortable, Sam, now that everyone's working remote, going back to the administration and saying, you know what, I can do some of this via Zoom with my students? And do you think that the administration should be thinking more about the health and well-being of the faculty and staff at your high school?
I think they're doing a pretty good job. The biggest challenge we have with kind of the Zoom stuff and the online, so our middle schools went voluntary instruction, and there's like 4 kids per class that will participate. The high school went mandatory, and they're doing better, but it's mostly the self-driven, high-achieving kids that would have naturally done it anyway. And so that relationship aspect that's missing, and I know that's going to carry over into college. I mean, that's, they talk about when when I've TA'd and when they're training me for teaching possible online classes, there's some people it's just not going to work. It's not going to work for them. And so it's a really difficult situation to find out how, those big lectures might be easier to do online because you're not really making a connection anyway when you're sitting in a room with 300 students. But, when you look at more specific programs or master's programs and stuff like that, I mean, actually working face-to-face and hands-on with colleagues is just invaluable. But I think the administrators are very, very tied up with what the local and state governments will allow them to do. And I'd be comfortable going to administration, talking about the safety of the kids. And if anything, I think this whole situation is kind of highlighting that flipped classroom, blended classroom, these are good things to be doing because, at the end of the day, anytime another illness breaks out, you have that foundation built to fall back on, and you already know how it works. So, I mean, going forward, as you said with the college thing, I was laughing with that they're a business, and I was thinking all you got to do is miss a few payments and you'll see the smiles disappear.
That's exactly right.
That welcoming, it's not very welcoming anymore. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Owe a couple dollars and see how long it's roll tide, right?
Yep.
Like, we're going to let you register for next semester. And I think there's, one of the things I wanted to ask Katie, a lot of institutions have announced big cuts, furloughs, rifts of employees. I don't know if that's been an Oberlin thing, but how are you remaining positive, right? In a state where, we're blessed, we can work remote, right? There's 20 plus million Americans that can't do that. So we're blessed to be able to work remote, but how are you staying positive in this time when you're worrying about the health and well-being of your students and your colleagues, but also the health and well-being of you and your family financially, right? In a really, really uncertain time.
Yeah. It's been tough, that's for sure. I mean, you can't avoid the news being in higher education. I feel like every day it's just learning who else is getting laid off this week, who's getting furloughed this week. At Oberlin, we've not had any of that yet. We were just sent an email last week about if we wanted to voluntarily furlough ourselves. We've been promised employment through the end of the fiscal year, which would be the end of June. So July 1, I'm definitely on my toes for that to see, what does that look like, because I'm sure the story will change. It's been very obvious. We just had a conversation yesterday with all of campus partners, campus members, divisions, and just getting the updates of where everyone is financially is very, very scary. As it relates to Oberlin, as somebody else had noted, I think it might have been Teresa, about this residential experience. We sell this residential experience, and so trying to figure out, how can we be creative about this in that scenario? We're trying to figure out what would this look like if we have to create a residential experience remote, and should we even have a remote remote experience, things that are being put out there. So in case, and people are wondering what colleges are considering, we've had everything from delayed starts, so starting in September, starting in October, not starting until January of next year. We've had thoughts about bringing different waves of students, so having certain groups of students come to campus for certain periods of time, and then swapping those out to maintain safe spaces across campus. Where Oberlin, where this has all been really good for Oberlin, I would say, is that we've been able to be a lot more creative and inventive than I think we have been in the past, because we're a older liberal arts institution. We definitely have kind of relied on history and how we've done things before. I don't even know if remote online courses were available before March of this year. So it's really kind of pushed our campus partners to be creative. And then when we initially started, it was a push to see, okay, can we get this online? And then individuals recognize that just taking the residential experience and transplanting it to an online setting and slapping the same name on it isn't the same thing. So that's where I've had a lot of fun, is being creative and learning from the students and just listening to their perspective about what they really enjoy, and trying to implement those in my workplace. So yes, I am very much nervous right now. It's definitely a very stressful time. I guess just right now, just trying to stay positive, keeping a positive mindset, keeping, in relation to staying with groups of people like the group of people I'm on right now, has definitely helped out. And also recognizing, I'm not the only person that's in this situation of worrying about my job, losing my job tomorrow, and it's not just a higher education issue, so.
Oh, that's really good. I think I've heard from so many parents who have said to me, of current college students, right? And our current college students and faculty and staff can kind of testify to this, that when they registered their students, or their students registered for fall of current students, well, we're just not going to register for online classes. We're going to register for face-to-face. And you know what? If we have a disruption, we'll just go online again. Everybody who's a student can tell you every class does not flip well online. Every instructor does not want to teach online, is not able to teach online. A lot of our faculty, it's just not their skill set. And, yes, we had to do that in the spring, right? Our hope would be that our institutions would spend this time identifying the master instructors who can teach online, flushing out those online curricula. We had to do it because of emergency in the spring. We shouldn't have to do that in the fall. I was talking to Tyrone, and as he's going through orientation with students at Kentucky, he's recommending jump in a couple online seats. Those seats are hard to find at places that are place-bound universities. Get in those seats that have been flushed out, the curriculum's been flushed out. So worst case, you're gonna be in the residence hall taking a class that was built to be online. Best case, you can be at home and you're still going to have some classes at UK. So it's one of those things. The other interesting part is that so many of us in the nonprofit higher ed space really at times thumbed our nose at the accelerated program. The program that, oh, it's only 16 months to get a baccalaureate degree. Oh, it's all online. Oh, you just go one night a week, right? Unless we were doing the programs. And now those folks have the best practice, right? The people who have online curricula, flexible things, whether you're for-profit or non-for-profit. So that's really interesting. Megan, I know that you wanted to talk a little bit about some of the work with CARES Act funds, some of the dialogue that's happening here in Knox County, as well as, can you talk also a little bit about your work with the Latino community and some of the challenges you're seeing specifically in Tennessee, where in Tennessee, even if you're an undocumented student, you don't only not get federal and state need-based aid, you pay not just out of state tuition, but out of country tuition, right? So now we've added this whole economic thing to those students and their families as well. How has COVID-19 impacted the students and the families that you work with in getting access to higher education in the American dream?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work with a lot of first-gen college students, but also first-gen Americans. And so it takes a lot to help walk the students and families through what the college access process looks like, period, and there's always going to be that communication barrier. And what I've heard from our seniors and including our college student here is how important that communication is for setting people at ease, even if we're not quite sure what the plan's going to be, but we're going to reach out and let you know this is what we're thinking. So a lot of our students, the students might be getting that, but the families are not getting that. So it's like uncertainty multiplied by a lot. So it's been a challenge for sure. On one hand, culturally, with a lot of my first-gen Americans and first-gen college, they were already planning on staying closer to home. They were planning on living at home, going to a community college or going to a local private colleges that are supportive of our undocumented community. So they're in some ways at an advantage that this won't have that great of an impact for them. However, also a lot of our students, since March, when high schools closed, March 12th here in East Tennessee, they went right out and got full-time jobs because they might be the only ones in their families that are legally employable. And their parents were working in service industry. Some of our worst stories are coming out of Sevier County, where everyone's really relying on tourism. That's where the Great Smoky Mountains are. And so everyone that cleaned the hotel rooms, worked in the hotel rooms, worked in any sort of service, hospitality, entire families have lost 100% of their income. They're not eligible for stimulus money. It's really desperate. And so the young people stopped going to high school and went full-time to work. And so even stopping in the fall to continue, stopping full-time job to continue with your college plans is going to be a really huge financial burden on their families. And I'm afraid how that's going to impact people. And then for our undocumented students, as you said, they're not eligible for community colleges. If they go to a local community college, to go for the year, paying out-of-state tuition is $18,000 a year out of pocket with no financial aid. So this idea of, well, you can take a year off and not go to your school of choice, you can go take some classes at a local community college. If they're not US citizens, then that's not an option. So that scares me a lot. As to your other question, the debate that we've been having locally in our K-12 system is that our system, because when they stopped in March, our students are not one-to-one. They've been providing some packets to families. Really, there's not much they've been able to do. They're not one-to-one technology, sorry. And so there's been some voluntary supports for students, but the money they're getting from the federal government through the CARES Act, the school board just voted to approve using the vast majority of that to provide devices, one-to-one technology for our students for the fall. And that's pretty controversial from an equity point of view because so many of our equity advocates, our schools were already underfunded. And so you're talking about no teachers' raises that have been promised for years after years. You're talking about no more guidance counselors, no more school social workers, all the other things that our students need supports in regularly. Now you're prioritizing a piece of technology. But if they don't have that piece of technology, how are they going to participate if the school year gets disrupted again? So it's a hard thing to figure out.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. And there's so many challenges, and Megan does a great job articulating a lot of the challenges that our Latino community continue to face, right? And you come to the US and you want to get a job and you want to go to college and you want to be successful, and we just put these barriers in place for students who all they want to do is get an education, right, and have the same opportunities. Tyrone, can you talk a little bit about, obviously, the transition 30 plus years in advising and working at different institutions, right? This has been a transition for you. Would you feel more comfortable in the fall if you had the opportunity to continue to advise remote and work with students remotely? And would you consider it if that opportunity presented itself? And how concerned are you as an employee that your health and well-being is primary and could be compromised should you return to campus?
Thanks for that question, Adam, because it's, I'm one of those persons that I'm in the high risk category. So, I got to think about a lot of stuff. But as Teresa Radomski Bamba mentioned, all this new information, we're learning new things every day about this virus. Even just today, there was a story about a person who had COVID-19, recovered from it, and tested positive a second time. So this thing just keeps mutating and it keeps changing. And so, I would be comfortable not being on campus in the fall. Quite honestly, Adam, if I can just be direct, we gotta get a vaccine. That's the only way that this country is going to be comfortable going back to something that you can feel that's normal. We've got to come up with a way to deal with this virus through a vaccine, because I would personally not like to put myself, or not even myself, but leave my students and my other colleagues in jeopardy. Going to campus and being on campus. You think about the buildings that we work in, Adam. These are closed buildings. So in other words, the air is circulating in one place. You can't even open a window in most of these buildings anymore. So what are they telling us now about this? They're saying that if you're in a closed environment and you're breathing the same air that everybody else is breathing for a long period of time, you can even be, affected that way. So I think that, for me personally, I like to continue to try to work remotely. I've been doing it now for, 3 months ago, 10 weeks, whatever that is. So I figured out a way to kind of be efficient with it. But I think that the universities and the colleges, they're going to struggle with this, because now you can't say we can't do it remotely, because we've done it remotely for the last 2 months. So why would you force, a workforce to come back on campus when you really don't have to? One last point real quickly, one interesting story I was looking at the other day. Even in places like New York, right, where basically you had people always in transit going to work, a third of the workforce now, they haven't been to work in 3 months. So what happens now with transit? People don't have to spend money to get transportation to go to work anymore. What's happening to all of those rich properties in New York if people are going to the buildings?
Well, I think, Tyrone, it's an interesting dynamic, right? That I was listening to people talk about the NCAA, kind of something that Eve and I know pretty well, and how this may be the thing that changes how student athletes are looked at. It takes something really dramatic, and I'm not talking football. I'm talking, my daughter ran sprints. Eve is a track and field athlete, a volleyball player. Those kids that are out there getting the best grades, they're taking care of business, they're balancing all of these things. And maybe so it's a lot of strange things, because it isn't just how we deliver instruction that's archaic, it's how we serve our students. Everybody on this panel sits one-on-one in a small room, 20 by 20, and meets with students and breathes the same air. And it's constant students, especially as good as everybody is on this panel and that is participating. It is 20, 30 students a day just walking in, bringing all of their germs and their pain and their struggles, right, to us. And I think that's the fear, is, right, caring about not only yourself. Many of us have kids and have older family members that Teresa's on campus, she's meeting with students, the students don't know they're sick, she gets it, she brings it home to her babies, right? Or her older mom and dad, or, and that kind of thing is the kind of thing I think all of us need to really, really consider. One of the questions that was brought forward from Carol is, what kind of increased mental health services have you seen the institution you work at have? I'll just kind of throw that out. Sabrina, have you seen increased mental health services for faculty and staff? Have people pushed out the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program at U of I, to say, if you're really struggling with something, please call?
Absolutely, they have. We get something weekly from the counseling center that talks about different workshops, I guess if you want to call them, that they are doing. And it's something that they're doing every week, and it's open to students and staff. Typically, the counseling center, it's only there for students, but these workshops that they are doing, whether it's a mindfulness workshop or talking about, you know, healthy eating or exercise and things like that, they are providing those tools and resources to the staff and the students. The EAP program is available, and that's always something that's been available. So it is something that they are continuing to push out. I know that because I have a relationship with someone in the counseling center, I know that they have been swamped and that they themselves are struggling. And because I personally have a degree in counseling, I can understand the aspect of trying to help navigate everyone else's mental health, but also trying to maintain your own. So they do have the resources available for students and staff, but they are also trying to navigate, again, they have been hit as well, the same as us, so they're trying to navigate that on their own as well.
That's great. Teresa, can you talk a little bit, because you work in honors at Miami, and Miami is not an institution that has huge numbers of Pell Grant recipients, right? It's not Akron or Toledo or Kent State or those places. And you work with honor students. Can you talk a little bit, because now we have 28 million people unemployed. We have current students who filed their FAFSA back 6 months ago when mom and dad were both working or income was different. How do you see, because it's one thing, I was always first gen low income, so I knew how to navigate those systems. I knew how to self-advocate. I knew how to talk to people. That's how that happens with mentors and people that do that. How do you see some of that playing out with students in honors, students who weren't needing services and resources before, but now may return to campus and need to appeal financial aid decisions and get other help that may exist for them? And how do you think Miami and other institutions can best pilot those students through that process?
So I think there are a few different things. Miami has an office called the Student Success Center with a focus on holistic student support beyond things like counseling services, academic advising, to focus entirely on students who are in some kind of need, whether that's financial need, if they have a need for outreach, if they have a need for any kind of support that goes beyond traditional academic support. And they're very good at connecting students to different resources on campus. So I think having that and having a very proactive office like that, I think was going to be a big help for us at Miami, but not every school has that. And I don't think a lot of schools are going to be able to shift in that direction because there aren't going to be additional resources for those students or to build a new office. And I think that, if the resources were there, schools would be able to start that kind of office. But if, what I'm hearing about budget issues, from essentially everyone I know in higher education is any indication, there won't be, there isn't the money there to start something new on top of what we're already doing. Schools are going to be contracting. So I think that that's a concern for any school that doesn't already have that in place. I think there's going to need to be a lot of outreach and following up with students for continuing students in particular, students who aren't enrolled in their classes. Students who have enrolled, I know Miami did our course registration over the last couple of weeks for fall, and if students drop that enrollment, proactively reaching out to those students and saying, hey, I see that this happened. Tell me what's going on. How can I help? What caused you to make this choice? And some of those students are probably going to make that choice out of concern for health, but other students are going to, hopefully will be able to say, and be willing to say themselves, which I think is part of the challenge, is getting students to admit that they're taking the semester off, they're transferring, whatever it is that they're doing, to say, I can't afford to be here in the fall. And there are different ways schools can do that. I know it helps to be calling, texting students in addition to email. I know my students have told me they're overwhelmed with the amount of email and notifications that they're getting in their inbox. So email is one way to communicate with them, but you're not going to get a response from a lot of students, especially ones who are overwhelmed, who are concerned about finances, who are trying to balance, wrapping up the academic year, but also helping their families financially. So I think schools can be proactive in that way, to that outreach, but also giving students maybe a less face-to-face way to communicate that they need financial assistance, if that is the case. And then schools are going to have to decide how much can we assist our students financially. Like, can we, extend scholarships? Can we change our payment plans so that we can keep students in the seat? At what point is getting some tuition from students better than getting no tuition at all? But I think there needs to be really concentrated outreach as schools see their enrollment change, especially if they start to see their enrollment decline over the summer, to find out why students aren't coming in, to connect them with the folks who can help them file a FAFSA if they've never filed a FAFSA before, apply for scholarships, make sure, I know at Miami they have some institutional money, but some of it you can't even be considered for until you filed a FAFSA. I have students who come from very affluent families and they don't bother, they don't need it. So they just say, well, I'm not going to apply for this. I've got my, my Red Hawk scholarship, the one that you get for, this ACT score and this GPA. And they're like, I'll just take this and go, because they know that FAFSA isn't going to do anything for them. So schools are really going to have to be proactive about that if this is something that's important for them, keeping their enrollment up, and students who fall out from the financial side of this.
It's great. So, and what I'm hearing is being almost to the point of intrusive, right? I remember when we started intrusive advising and everybody said, intrusive sounds bad. Now everybody's intrusive, right? But rather than being in denial and saying, oh, everything's going to be fine. Eve, it's going to be fine this fall. Come on to campus. Everything's great. But if the student's your customer, or the student is your parishioner, or the student is your patient, then loving on them in that way by being intrusive and saying, Eve, we're going to work a plan B. Okay, let's get this plan B set up. Let's get you in an online course this summer. Let's get this thing built for you because you're important to us. And we don't have to say you personally are important, but you being at the University of North Dakota is really important to us because we need you now more than ever. I wanted to give everybody one word or one thing. So Erin, what is the one thing you hope that seniors, current seniors know and their families know going into or preparing for an uncertain fall? Just real quick, one quick thing.
Wow, I feel like so put on the spot there. I hope that students that, they understand that, hopefully colleges will communicate, there'll be some flexibility. The parent have some flexibility. I've already received an email from an institution on the college side of how they're altering their fall calendar. And so my hope is that, flexibility just continues to happen throughout the next few months and we're all in this together.
Awesome. Sam, how about you? What do you think a student and or their parents need to know? Short and sweet.
Gen Ed's in the summer. Test that online class out. Take a Gen Ed that is not really going to apply, save your classes, but also be aware of those track ones. If you got to take Chem 1, Chem 2, Organic 1, Organic 2, that organic chemistry is going to be painful anyway. So taking it online or in person, whatever. Get the D, pass, move on. But yeah, just test that online thing out, get rid of some Gen Eds, and then go from there.
Because most students who are in high school, Aaliyah, Eve, can be taking classes this summer at the local community college online. Keep your brain sharp. If you're working out, this is another way to work out, right? To work out some of your academic skills so you don't have as much summer melt. Kai, one thing.
Hope for the best, plan for the worst.
Words to live by.
Katie, what's the one thing you would tell seniors and their parents right now?
The future's digital, so practice, practice, practice. There are Ivy League level institutions that are offering free courses right now. Some of them you can even earn credit for, so take a cool class, get some experience, and get ready for the fall.
Awesome. Dr. Megan, what's one thing you would tell seniors and their parents right now?
I'm going to encourage my students that no matter how busy they are working or trying to support their family financially, to make sure they try to take some classes in the fall and stay engaged somehow, even if it's just part-time, so that you're not completely losing this mentality of going to college and being engaged. So even if it's halfway, that's better than sort of giving up altogether, in my opinion.
Love it. Teresa, one thing you would tell students and their parents?
Prioritize, whether that's, you know, your family, your needs are yours. So what comes first to you? Is it continuing your education? Is it making sure your education is, you know, you're attending a certain type of school? You know, is it best for you to wait a semester or a year to get the education at a time that's going to be better for you to learn? If learning in person is important to you, then make that your priority. If your finances are the thing that is your top priority, if your health is the thing that's the top priority, I can't tell you which thing to put first, but make your priorities and act on that.
Awesome. Sabrina, what's the one thing you would tell your students, all students, and their parents preparing for college this fall in an uncertain time?
I would say tap in, tap into the resources, tap into the supports that you have, and making sure that you are accessing them, not just knowing what they are, but actually utilizing them and leveraging all of the supports and the resources that you have around you.
Awesome. Farah, so you are a current college student. What would you tell current seniors and their parents that are coming to Alabama this fall? What do they need to know in this uncertain time? Ms. Sanders. Mute. You're on mute, Farah.
Sorry. I feel like everyone has covered the class and the academic part pretty well. So I would say during this time, especially if you're coming to my university, but really everywhere, be creative, because right now the future is uncertain. We're not even sure. I'm a really involved person on my campus. We're not sure at all how the clubs face, how the organizations, how we're going to operate when we come back. So if you're on social media, if you have some type of internet presence, there are ways you can start a blog. You can do things where you still are in a time of uncertainty, or even if we do end up going online, you're still somehow involved, and that can be on a college resume, and that can be very interesting to people that will be looking at you for a future job, because in these uncertain times, you took initiative to still somehow involve yourself in our online community.
Eve, what is the one thing you would tell us? So what would you tell all of us who are working with high school students that are going to college in the fall? What would you tell us that we need to know about you and your classmates at this time?
Well, nothing that I can think of off the top of my head, but all I can really say is, like, thank you. Like, that's, like, I don't think is not enough, or it never will be. But, like, faculty, staff, teachers, educators, people in the education world. And I didn't mention this earlier, but I plan on majoring in elementary education. So as a future educator myself, I would just want someone to say thank you. Because it goes a long way, but still, like, students and teachers, you'll just know how much, like, students appreciate the teachers.
Thank you.
But yeah, I would just say thank you.
Thank you, Eve. Ms. Riddle, you can close us out. So what would you tell your classmates? What have you learned? You've been now on 2 webinars. What have you learned, and how has this influenced what you would tell your classmates, or what you're going to do for the fall in planning?
All right, so just being on the 2 webinars and having this type of access to hear, from people from all different backgrounds, as far as TRIO, as far as college workers, as far as students, definitely has opened my eyes to the fact that, like you guys said, college is business. And so me and other students, we've always seen college as, oh, go follow your dream, go learn what career field you have to pursue. You have to find yourself, but never in our reality, we're giving you money, college takes money, and then education is sprinkled in there type. So I definitely think the business aspect has been shown to me. And one thing that I kind of have like two things. One thing that I would tell the seniors right now is, and other people in my class, we have to not only stay advocating for our education, but we have to stay open-minded with the education. All these seniors are shooting down. I'm not going to Pellissippi. I'm not going to community college. I'm not taking online classes this summer. I'm not going to do it. But in our reality, if that's the smarter thing to do, then that's what you need to do. And I tell future seniors, even the juniors now that are coming up, do not get discouraged. This does not mean that you have to work any less hard. If anything, you have to work harder. There is a lot of uncertainty in America, in the world, really. But there's one thing that you can always ensure that you do is advocate for your education, learn your education, and further your education. Because I think a lot of people, especially the juniors that are about to be seniors, are like so like slacky, like, oh, I'm not going to take the ACT, I don't require that anymore. But if the world just happened to open back up normal in August miraculously, everybody would be like shocked that they did not use this time to continue furthering their education and fighting for their education and looking for different things.